Anigan the way we done, Indigenous Osishak, Dodain, Anishinaabe, Ogichida, Three Fires Society, Gathering of the Sacred Pipe Sundance, American Indian Movement. My elders told me when I came home from Wounded Knee in 1973 that I had to have an Indian name. And that's when I learned how beautiful our way of life, our culture was at one time. And they sent this young man without my knowledge. When I came home from Wounded Knee, they sent him out to the woods to seek a vision. He was to fast for 4 days, 4 nights, no food to eat, maybe just a little tea, to seek a vision. He was to fast for 4 days, 4 nights, no food to eat, maybe just a little tea to drink. And sometime during those 4 days, the Creator would come. He would present my name. And the reason why they did that, they were going to honor me. They were going to give me an eagle feather when I came home from Wounded Knee. They were going to make me a chief. It was the first time in the history, in our history, in over 100 years, they had to make it of a chief. And they said that the eagle feather was so sacred at one time, you couldn't even touch it unless you had an Indian name. And so this young man was sent out in the woods, unknown to me because there was an assassination attempt on my life following Wounded Knee by the FBI. And I was healing. And my wife, every day she'd come visit me in the hospital, told me I had to go over to Wisconsin, a place called Round Lake, a Anishinaabe traditional community, but wouldn't tell me why. It just kept bugging me every day. I couldn't leave. I was all stapled together. I was shot right below the heart. Bullet went through my pancreas, lodged by my spine. I couldn't go anywhere. But she kept bugging me every day. And finally I said, let's go. We got in our car and we drove. I got there was cars all over in the woods parked. And they brought out this big drum, they call it the big drum. The big drum was brought over here by the Lakota people because they were burning them up. The churches and the government was destroying everything that we had, our teepees, our sweat lodges, our ceremonies, our sacred drums, our rattles, our medicine. Everything was being burnt up. And these women came from South Dakota, and they presented this drum to the Anishinaabe people and wanted us to guard it for them. Someday, they said, we're going to be strong enough, we're going to come back and get that drum. That's the story they told me when I arrived there that day. They took me right into a sweat lodge, purification ceremony. I had to purify myself because I didn't know what was going to happen that day. But they knew they had to purify. They had to burn the sage and the sweet grass. And I had to sweat. I had to purify myself not only on the outside, but from the inside. And then they told me there what was going to happen that day. He said, I went out in the woods, and the third night of my fast, I begged the Creator before I went to sleep that night. Homi Shoma, get you money to a grandfather, Great Spirit. My brother has to have his name. They're going to make him a chief tomorrow. He said about 2 o'clock in the morning in his dead sleep, he could see the sheet lightning coming from the west. And as it got closer, the trees started to blow back and forth. All of a sudden, there was a bolt of lightning, thunder, and he woke up. And sure enough, the trees were blowing back and forth, and the lightning was there. And it started to drizzle. packed up his gear, walked all the way out of the woods 5 miles, got in his car and came back. And told me that in the sweat lodge. From that day forth, my name would be Nigan the way we done. The thunder before the storm. And I like that a lot better than Clyde. It means something to me. It came from the Creator. It didn't come out of the Bible. Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. That's how beautiful it was at one time for our people. But the federal government and white European education and organized religion, I'm not talking about Christianity now. I'm talking about organized religion, works day in and day out to strip us of our language, our culture, our traditions, then to remove us from our land through the removal, the relocation program, so they can come in and steal the gold and the timber, take our timber, our water rights, take our fish away from us, take everything that we survived on for hundreds and thousands of years, take it from us. That's what I found out. That's what I know. When the American Indian movement was born in July of 1968, we felt that absolutely nothing was being taught in the public and parochial school systems of America. No colleges or universities dare talk about what they did to Indian people. They talk about cultural diversity. I don't know nothing about cultural diversity. I don't see no cultural diversity here. I know that people don't know nothing about us. The only thing they know is what they see in John Wayne and George Armstrong Custer and Lone Ranger and Tonto. That's all they see. They don't want them to know the truth. When the American Indian movement was born in July of 1968, the only book written here called Minnesota Star of the North. How many of you have seen that? Raise your hand. How many of you have seen the book Star of the North, Minnesota Star of the North? Raise your hand. No one. That's what I'm talking about. 2 pages into the book, when you open it up, what they show. You know, at one time we were 6, 7, 8 feet tall. Muscular, that's where they portrayed us. With mohawks. Everybody who was Indian had to be a mohawk. That's the kind of hair they put on us. He had a white woman around the neck, and he was cutting her right here, and the blood was flying in the air. And this little baby girl, this little woman is holding her mother by the arm, by the leg, crying. And here's the poor farmer laying in the field. All kinds of arrows in his back. And the farm burning up, and the cornfield burning up in the background. That's what they taught people. All these doctors and educators and degreed people with every kind of initial in front of their name didn't know absolutely nothing. And still don't know nothing about us today. They build these cultural diversity programs and equity, and they talk about all those things. Where's the curricula? I was in Morrill Hall. The black people were fighting for their rights, for good education, scholarships, and knowledge about what happened to them. How did they get here? Where did they come from? What tribe, what nation did they belong to? And they took over Morrill Hall and had the forces of me. I was there, I went there. I went there to talk about Indian studies. I went there to talk about the commitments made through treaties that we'd always have a good education. They were supposed to have free tuition right here in this university. They still have it up in Morris, but they don't have it here. They didn't get this land for nothing. And when we start speaking out about that, it didn't take long. Just 3 years after the formation of the American Indian Movement, the FBI, the Justice Department, all the security organizations in the world, America started watching us. We don't have weapons of mass destruction, but we knew back then that 75% of all the energy resources left in America was still on our land. 75%, 90% of all the fresh water left And this part of the country comes from that northern watershed. The Mississippi River starts spring water. I remember as a little boy, we could go to Lake Itasca, going out to the wild rice beds, and we'd go out and drink that water. It was so clear, you could go out in the middle of the lake, sunshine, you could see the fish all the way 30 feet down. It's all beautiful. It was one time. And I remember growing up on the reservation. They only had 2 schools there. One was a public school and one was a mission school. St. Benedict's Mission. The Benedictines are right below the Jesuits. They're the law enforcement arm of the church. When all the denominations fail to Christianize Indian people, they bring in the Benedictines. Nuns that look like the front line of the Green Bay Packers. Never saw their feet or nothing. They're covered completely in black. Scared the hell out of you when you saw them. That's where we had to go. If we didn't go to public school, we had to go to mission school. And I remember going to school in the morning, I couldn't understand it. I hated school. I hated it. You had to pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and on the other side of the blackboard was a picture of some guy. He had on black patent leather, high-heel shoes, little white nylons up to his knees, breeches on, little ruffled shirt, blonde wig, rouge on his cheeks. I found out later wooden teeth was the father of our country. That confused me. My grandfather was White Crane. He was one of our principal chiefs. You could pinch him anywhere on his body, he wouldn't get an inch of fat. He didn't look like Boy George. But there was nothing in the curriculum, and it's still not there today. We know today that 70% of all the food that's consumed in the world today comes from Indian people. Medical science and doctors have said they haven't come up with a medicine yet that Indian people didn't have, use, and practice. Nothing. I was down in Teotihuacan 4 years ago. I got to go into the city, the oldest city in the world. 280,000 people live there. Second, third floor buildings. The water came in from the mountains, came down through the village. They showed it to me. Viaduct into all these homes. They pulled up the slabs and showed me how they worked, how they did it. And then when they ran out of the city, the farmers would come and they would collect those feces and then they would go fertilize their gardens. They had running water when the Spaniards were still living in caves over in Europe. I said, I heard about brain surgery. I heard people were practicing. I heard it from Sundancers that come up here in Sundance that people were practicing brain surgery. They took me way back in the corner and there was Indians now are archaeologists there. They finally won to go in there and complete that archaeologist dig there. They had hundreds, piles of skulls. They come and brought me those skulls and showed it to me. They had little pinholes. Some were 10, 20 years apart. Were they able to go into the brain and relieve pressure and poison? And the people lived. The Spaniards were still living in caves over in Europe. How come we don't learn that? How come we have to learn that to get a degree? Huh? How come that's not taught? How would our children feel? Huh? When we formed the movement, we had a 4.5 grade level. We lived to be 43.5 in American, white America, 65 plus. You can go on and on. When the unemployment rate creeps up a little bit, around 6, 7, 8%, they panic. All the bankers come together. Countries try to find ways to stimulate the economy. How about our unemployment? My reservation, 62% of our people are unemployed. On Pine Ridge, it's 82%. How come we're not taught that? We talk about economics and all that. How come nothing like that's taught? Because they want to see us that way. They're trying to want us to fail. And the American Indian movement stood up to demand what was rightfully ours. And when we found that book, we said we wanted to take out of the curriculum. We want the truth to be told. Martin Luther King said, only the truth will set you free. We want the truth to be told. We couldn't get any school board, any of those that develop curricula, get it approved. You couldn't get no one to do that. All in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, an all-white community, the students heard us, and guess what they did? White students heard us. Guess what they did? They cleaned out the library. They checked out that book. They took it home with them. They looked at it and read it. 2 days later, they came back to this high school. They built a bonfire and they burnt up every single one of those books. And even after that, it took us 2 years, 3 years to get it out of the curricula. But it's never been replaced. And that's why we have these mascots today. That's the way they look, savage and he's. I was with my little sister here, up in Solomon, Idaho. That's where the Weaver family shot it out with the FBI, about taxes and stuff. His wife got killed. Yeah, super. I hate to use the word redneck, but their necks glowed in the dark. That's how bad it was up there. And we dared to go in there. Guess what their mascot was? Guess what their name was? Salmon River, home of the fighting savages. That's the pictures they put on these big signs all lit up as we were driving into town. Only about 3,000 people lived there, and about 2,800 of them bringing their own little babies with them in their arms. Just who are these people that tell us we have to get rid of all this ignorance in America? Our beautiful mascots and our powwows and our people doing splits in the air when they get out, non-Indian people, the way they portray us. And we went in there, got deathly quiet. Me and Mike Haney and my sister here, Sid Crew, got deathly quiet. And like Daniel Snyder and over 2,000 presidents, college presidents, athletic departments across America, they said they would never, ever would they give up their name. Never. Well, about a year and a half, they were gone. That's the work we do. It's important. It has a tremendous psychological effect. I do a lot of stuff. I mentor children. I take them to games, and they want to go see the Cleveland. They want to go see who this Wahoo guy is, They want to go to Kansas City and watch games like that. And then here comes the Viking fans. They've been partying all morning, tailgating, drunk, come in with yellow hair, golden hair, purple. One side of their face is purple, the other side is gold. Got horns on their head, set up behind us. As soon as the Vikings start getting a little bit behind, playing one of these so-called Indian teams, mascots, people sitting all over the audience, tomahawks in their hand, chicken feathers in their hair, paint on their face. They start hollering, "Massacre them effing Redskins. Scalp them." Kids start shaking. They grab me by the arm. Uncle, let's go home. Let's go home. No, I'm not going anywhere. I paid for these tickets. And I get up and I confront those drunks. Pretty soon here comes the security all around us. And every single time I prevail. Those drunks have to leave. And the majority of the audience stand up and join me in those efforts to try to shut those kind of people up. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at today. I'd like to see I haven't seen it yet. I'd like to see some real diversity in some college. I'd like to see everybody learn the truth. That's all we want. They don't know nothing about what happened to the Dakota people here. Shortly after we formed, there was a young man from White Earth, my reservation. Didn't look Indian. He had blonde hair, white hair. Young boy, he was a stock boy at the Historical Society. They got all shook up because the American Indian movement is going to come and confiscate all the drums and the scalps and skulls and everything that they have. So they had a security meeting. They hired this young man to stay over at night, and put all these things down. Little crow skull, his scalp stretched between a ring. Put him away. Hide him. American Indian movement's coming. They didn't know this young man was Indian. Turned out to be Dr. David Boyer, went to the highest level in education in Washington, D.C. Called me and Dennis up one night, meet us over here at Perkins on 27th in Riverside. He photographed everything, Xeroxed everything, took pictures of Little Crow, his scalp, found out that Shakopee was still being used at Mayo Clinic, the skeletal remains strung up for pre-med studies. He gave us that book, and we started exposing the truth. That not one single person, out of 300 people that were sentenced to die, not one of them spent more than 5 minutes in a courtroom. Study it. Go check it out. Go to the historical site. I don't think I'm telling you. Go on over there and find it. It's the truth. It's not in the curricula. You'll never see it in a school or college like this. Yeah? You hear about the crucifixions and all that kind of stuff, but you know about the crucifixions of Indian people, the slaughter of Indian people. And we start exposing, oh, these guys are radicals. They're just trying to stir up trouble. Well, sue us. Take us to court. We can prove everything we're saying. And we were successful in getting Shakopee's body. We wanted to make a big public publicity out of it. But Shakopee's people were so beaten down at that time. They didn't have Mystic Lake. They didn't have Little Sick. They didn't have these big casinos. They lived with dirt floors, tar paper shacks. And so we did it quietly. We took them out of Rochester, Mayo Clinic, and brought them back home to them. And Little Crow's scalp, his body, all of that was returned to the Shakopee Mdewakanton people for proper burial. And that's kind of where we're at, why we're here, where we're at today. They're honoring us. How the hell can they honor us that way? What would they do if we honored them? What if I had all the casino money in the world and I built a team, I bought out the New Orleans Saints, buy the New Orleans Saints, develop a mascot. Maybe I'll have a mascot dressed up like the Pope. Every time there's a touchdown made, and people can wave a crucifix, do the crucifix chop instead of the tomahawk chop. Do the crucifix chop. This little Pope can run around and sprinkle holy water and all the drunks. Instead of slapping themselves, what's wrong with the people that will slap themselves in the mouth and make a ridiculous sound they call a war whoop? What is wrong? They must be sick. They must be sick. So instead of doing that, they just wave a crucifix. Instead of a war chant, sing the Ave Maria or the Lord's Prayer. We all know the Lord's Prayer. How long do you think that would last? We know and you know it would never last. It'd be over tomorrow. Little Black Sambo is gone. John Wayne is dead. Now little Red Sambo has to go. It's all over. We have to forget that. We have to get on with our life. But we can't get on our life until we face the truth. This place should be full here tonight. If I was running a cultural diversity program, there would be every Indian in this city would be here tonight. Every black person would be here tonight, here in this hall. The job and the work is hard, but it has to be done, and we're asking you to join us in that effort on Sunday. Rich, thank you for listening a little bit. And the reason why I talk about these things, I remember my mother tonight. I speak about my mother, I'm speaking for every Indian in America. My mother went into boarding school. She was growing up as children. I said 7 daughters and 5 boys. We wondered why her knees swelled up on her all the time when it's going to rain. We'd ask her about it. Oh, it's just the weather. Don't ask so many questions. At night, I'd hear old lady Mitchell, Mrs. Big Bear, come to the house. They think we're all sleeping. 10, 11 o'clock at night, they think we're all sleeping. They talk this strange language that we never hear during the day. They didn't want us to know how to speak Indian. I found out later we'd be punished like them. They'd play cards and tell stories in a strange language. I'd be laying there listening to them, little boy. They'd laugh so hard they'd cry. They'd fall right off their chair. Next thing I'd hear the alarm go off and you had to go to school. Which was St. Benedict's School. You know? It was long after the formation of the American Indian movement that my mother told her story. Every time she got caught speaking Indian, she had to get down on her hands and knees with a little pail of water in those boarding schools where she was kept for 9 solid years. She had a little pail of soap and water. She had to clean the toilets and clean the urinals. Well, all the other kids that gave up their language, the culture, were playing outside. Come knock on the window. Angeline, come on. Forget about that language. Come on out, have some fun. She never gave it up. And toward the end, because she never gave it up, they tied sacks of marbles on her knees. Hundreds like her in the schools to strip them of their language, to give it up. It was so beautiful. Yeah. When Columbus landed here, what did he say? I come upon a people that have no Bible, no use for a church. They don't know how to cuss. They don't know how to swear. They share everything that they have. You ask them for their shirt on their back, they'll take it off right now and give it to you. He told the Queen they're perfect for exploitation. They estimate today there was 16 to 27 million people here. The last massacre at Wounded Knee in 1890, there was 240,000 of us left. Jewish people are still here. Dan Snyder should know a little bit about genocide, but there are tribes that have been totally erased from the face of the earth. That's why we took on this issue. We have to get rid of that type of ignorance. And you in academics, you would have all the degrees. I don't have that. I never made it through the 5th grade. Never made it through the 5th grade. I don't know how to write a speech. I never wrote a speech in my life. I got to talk about what I saw and what I've learned from tribes all over America and all over the world where I travel today. That's where I learned about the real history. It's still there, and it's available. Today you can punch in the computer and find it anywhere in the world. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. I'm deeply honored to have my beautiful younger sister. I have a tremendous amount of honor for Betty McCullen. She's brought this issue to the forefront. And I have to thank, what was this guy's name? Don, the guy from the Clippers. What was his name? Sterling. Somebody asked what I thought about Don Sterling. I'm like, wow, at least he brought this issue forward again for us. We're going to have to thank him for that. You know, look what they've been doing with us for 50, 60 solid years, what they've been doing to us. And nobody's speaking out other than us, what we have to do to rid that, our communities of that, for our children, unborn generation to come. Miigwech.